Hey guys, what is going on? Uncle Valk, I'm back here today, and oh man, as soon as I come back, we got some zingers in the community. We finally get our headhunt that we normally get for Global Anniversary. It's basically an ML5 selector, guys. If you don't know what the headhunt event is, it's an ML5 selector. We get up to see Phantom Politis. The part that's really sticking out to me is you can proceed with one additional summon potentially. I don't know what that means. Normally when we have headhunt, it normally doesn't say that. I don't know if it's going to give us a second summon, but hey, if that's the case, just keep in mind, guys, the information I'm about to give you, you might be able to get 2 of these characters. Without further ado, here is the tier list. Now, this data comes from myself and a bunch of other legend players that I talk to, as well as many Emperor players as well. So the data comes from essentially all top 200 players, and with all of our experiences combined, we probably add up to like 10-20,000 games usually per season played. It's going to include a lot of the buffed units as well, so make sure you guys are always keeping your eyes out for the freshest information, but also make sure you guys are keeping up with like legend players who stream and see how their testing has been going. But to kick off, these are currently the best units in the game, period. No debates, no discussion, no ifs and or buts about it. Ambitious Tywin has slowly been creeping up to be better and better and better. Like beginning of the year, we had like Albedo and stuff, made him better, right? Before that, it was like Abyssal Yufine was really keeping him relevant, especially he's so good versus Lia as well, since he could burn souls, and he's just been on a steady upward trend. You know, we got Haste, he got even better, and now with Mort being buffed, he's just going to be the best tank in the game, period. He's like coming real close to giving these other 2 characters a run for their money. Doesn't mean every other character is weak, right? But these 3 characters are so good. I think every single account needs to have all 3, and there is no discussion about it. You can obviously get Death Dealer Ray from Fallen Lands selector, but if you didn't, this will also be a chance to pick him up. And speaking of Death Dealer Ray, you know what, let's just talk about him second. If you watched Worlds this year, you'll know that Death Dealer Ray is basically default first pick for any player, and I mean any player who isn't a cleaver, who isn't playing a super speed-based composition, because he just does too many things. He's a good debuffer, he's a support, he can, with Potion Vial, help you stabilize against a small amount of debuffs, and on top of all of that, he does damage, he makes your team into damage. It just gives you so much flexibility, so much options to counterplay your opponents. Now, we all know Epic 7, especially the PvP side of things, is about how you punish your opponent's mistakes. Not only is Death Dealer Ray super hard to punish, he also punishes so many things, right? If you look at units like Remnant Violet, or why he can never make a resurgence, it's because his evasion just doesn't work when your opponent cannot, no contact, put you to sleep and then put a lot of injury on you so that he's not even healing back. He's so proficient at punishing so many units in the game. These 2 characters, I just think, make up the core of so many accounts. Whether you are a slow player, you're a tank down player in 2024, you have to have them. Ray Tywin, we've seen that pick so many time and time again during Worlds, and it's just, you cannot play the game without these 2. And even if you speed up, you're a standard player, you're a speed flex player, there's so many times where Ray Tywin is just the correct pivot for you anyway. I think the third character, which rivals them in power level, but isn't maybe as valuable because she's so often pre-banned in RTA, is Phantom Politis. She also does the same thing as these 2 fellas, where she just punishes too many things. She's fast enough to punish these mid-speed characters. Like, she can honestly race Conqueror Lilias a lot of times, and unlike Conqueror Lilias, who was one of the best openers in the game for over 2 years, she doesn't get punished by Zeo since she's always stealth. She punishes Fighting Spirit, which is the reason why Landy and Yufine fell off pretty hard, and she's always just been able to hold them down. And on top of all of that, she punishes stealth characters by stripping their stealth buffs, punishes buffs in general. You can't play too safe because she's always pulling the highest attack power. It also lets you play very safe, right? Because when you open a draft with her, all you need is 1 single DPS on 3, and people have been playing her a lot with the new Afternoon Soak Flan, so she's just a all-encompassing support that holds back some of the strongest units in the entire game. And these 3 units are just the strongest 3 units in the game, period. Every single account needs to pick them up. Now, after the best units in the game, this is like your A tier, right? These are top tier units, but I still think they need combos. They need to be played in the right matchups. They need supports. These units are Blood Moon Haste, Abyssal Yufine, Navy Captain Landy, Zeo, Conqueror Lilias, Requiem Roana, Arbiter Vildred, Dragon King Sharun, Belian, Briar Witch Iseria, Solitaria, and Eternal Wanderer Ludwig, and let's go over them real quick. Blood Moon Haste got buffed at the beginning of 2024, and ever since then, he's kind of stayed on top of the entire metagame. He replaced a lot of revivers like Destina, and that's just because on top of being able to be tanky, anchor down his composition, he can always drop a scythe, and a trade kills a lot of characters real well. He's part of the reason why characters like Abyssal Yufine and Navy Captain Landy are no longer the best of the best. The whole reason he fell off is the moment you see your opponent go Blood Moon Haze, you can just kind of slow down with characters like Ambitious Tywin, Death Dealer Ray, and suddenly Blood Moon Haze just isn't that oppressive anymore. Now, Abyssal Yufine and Navy Captain Landy, I think are two of the best default DPS characters in the game. And when I say default DPS characters, I mean you can pick them really early in your RTA draft, and they have a lot of matchups that even if they are bad matchups, they can still win. And I would kind of tie them together. They're kind of very similar. They both need Elberus Ritual Sword, although for Yufine, I suppose you can just use Holy Sacrifice. That's also a viable artifact that makes her pretty top tier. The reason why they're not in the top tier now is because there's just so many ways to play around them. Death Dealer Ray does quite a number around them. Ambitious Tywin, they're at a risk of activating his Enrage buff, which defense breaks their entire team. And of course, Phantom Politis holds their fighting spirit. Zio is a cleave combo character. You might think, well, you know, if he's always that fast and cleavers play fast, don't you play him anti-cleave? If that's what you think, then welcome to Epic 7. Whenever a character is designed to beat something, they usually become adopted by that thing. And because he's always guaranteed to go first, it's let a lot of slower players basically pick him up and guarantee that they can go first turn and cleave with him. The reason why he's not that good right now, he actually fell off a little bit more. He made a comeback with Harsetti because he's one of the few characters who can steal the first turn ahead of Harsetti. And that actually enables him to open up a whole new line of cleave. Because of Harsetti's release, Zio actually got, you know, like a slight bump in usage. Conqueror Lilias, I feel like I don't need to give this character any introductions. Most of you guys should already have her from the Fallen Lands selector, but if you don't, and you already have all the better characters, I still think she's a very, very proficient opener unit. And when I say opener, I mean both as a unit to take first turn in the match, but also to open your draft with, because yes, there are ways to punish her, but the dual attacks, the vigor buff just gives so much value. Even last season, top legend players like Light E7 made a living playing characters like Conqueror Lilias with Blood Moon Haze, with Navy Captain Landy, and just supporting that Landy and just buffing up. I think it's a bit harder to do that this season, but that does not diminish Conqueror Lilias' viability as an opener both in your combat and in your draft. Requiem Roana got a pretty serious buff midway through the year, and ever since then she's been one of my favorite cleave bridges, and I still think she's probably the strongest one right now. The main thing that's making her strong is you have all of these openers like Conqueror Lilias, Peyra, Ran, and no matter what, they can extra turn, which means even if you have to play through Abyssal Yufine, you have to play through Politis, as long as you're only playing through one, you can still get her a turn. And when she does, she's going to do a lot of damage. Her damage is crazy, and she has the utility of pushing back the enemy's cooldowns, which not only is it one of the strongest forms of crowd control, but it also counters characters like Amiki. Inheritor Amiki has been a real threat, and I think that by itself has kept Requiem Roana pretty relevant. Oh yeah, and I guess she also, because you build her super high effectiveness, beat ER BBKs. As long as you secure that first turn, she'll be solid. Arbiter Vildred is, oh boy, he's actually slowly and steadily been climbing up in usage. The reason is really simple. He just does a lot of damage. You have characters like Empyrean Ilonav. There's just more ways to mitigate damage, right? We even got Albedo this year. And throughout all of that, you really can't deny how much damage Arbiter Vildred brings. If you get 2 ultimates with him, drop the Descending Blade with attack buff, with greater attack buff, with his Alexis Basket, even if your opponent has a lot of mitigation, he'll bring a lot of value. If your opponent doesn't have mitigation, they're playing something super aggressive, Arbiter Vildred plus 100% combat readiness, making that comeback is huge. And on top of that, he has the additional benefit of getting multiple builds. Arbiter Vildred will easily be able to punish your opponent guessing wrong, whether he's on a full squishy damage set or if he's on a bulky bruiser counterattack set. It actually creates a huge matchup advantage for you, the picking player. Dragon King Sharun this is kind of a conflicting one, but I want to put her up here because because I want you guys to know this is one of the few characters where, while she's not a direct hard counter to Death Dealer Ray, she's one of the few characters who is a remote counter to him at all. I hope I got that across correctly, because Death Dealer Ray is such a strong character, you know? There's almost no way to counterplay him. At least Ambitious Tywin, like, you could put up immunity and you're mostly immune to his antics, but Death Dealer Ray can just strip away your buff, strip away your immunity. And if he has to do that, that's where Dragon King Sharun comes in. You know, she steals combat readiness, puts up Cascade. It's still very skill intensive for the player who picks Sharun to be able to use her effectively, to be able to build the team correctly so that she can support a team that can match her speed. It's not a direct hard counter where, like, you know, if somebody picks Arbiter Vildred and you pick Briar, which, oh no, they're suddenly cooked, right? Dragon King Sharun, you still have to think about how you construct the rest of the team together in order to beat the Death Dealer Ray. But there are so little characters in the game who can beat him. I would put her up here just because she gives you a very easy access to a draft that can do it. After her is Belian. Belian's just always one of the titans of the game. Although I do think Belian has fallen off quite a bit of ways since the heydays. Now there's even characters like Frida who can soul burn and completely bypass Belian's restrictions. You could be sealed from like a Luna, and Belian just from turn 1 just doesn't work. But no matter what, if you can get a Belian on third pick Ban Protect against a Cleaver, especially with a tank protection set build, it's just so much of a threat. And I would say Belian's right now played like one of 3 ways. People would play her at like 280 plus speed with high effectiveness and use her to just catch people off guard. That build's gonna get replaced by Malua real quick, but don't worry about it. People play her either on counterattack or speed set with a 3F artifact, and that's just a lot of damage. Or you're playing her at base speed as a tank with protection set Aureus. It's not a death sentence for cleavers, but it puts them at such a huge disadvantage because you're locking away their souls, you have protection set, and on top of that you have Aureus. It's just adds so much slog for the cleaver to have to chomp through in order to reach your valuable units, like if you also have a Navy Captain Landy or an Abyssal Yufine. After that, this one is juicy. Briar Witch Iseria. Briar Witch Iseria actually has like 3-4 ways she can be played now, and that is all thanks to her exclusive equipment giving her up to 10 speed. Now I'm playing on 9 speed, so I have the option to do this, but if you do that, you're playing her with a Fenris artifact, and you're playing her as an opener, and you're just soul burning your Frida, and you're opening the draft for your team. Your combat readiness, pushing everything, it is a cleave build. Now, on the opposite end of that, the one I've been playing a lot is I've been using a slower one to support my BBK. And you can do something like that because since she's a character that has perfect hit rate, she can be built with a lot of effectiveness, you can build a lot of effect resist on her, you can even bring Bastion of Hope to just be a stat stick for your entire team, further supporting your BBK. And the ambiguity of her build, right? And we talked about this. One biggest strength of a lot of these characters is you have to make your opponent guess correctly. They think you're an opener, but actually, you know, all your stuff is slow and all of their cleansers have to pass their turn. Suddenly, you strip all their buffs, defense break them, and then your BBK cleans up. Briar Witch BBK, really strong. You could play her fast, play her slow, play her mid speed, still on damage. She's still pretty efficient there too. Really solid character after her exclusive equipment, but I definitely say you have to have the right pieces around her to make her shine. After that is Solitaria. Solitaria was originally falling off a little bit because Ambitious Tywin was so strong, but a couple of characters coming into the metagame really boosted her position, namely Arbiter Vildred. You got Silvyn Sage Vivian as well, Silvyn Sage Vivian, and Afternoon So Flan. Those are all focus characters, and Solitaria locks them away completely, disables them. They just no longer work. I mean, that's on top of all the characters she used to counter as well, like Remnant Violet and Archdemon Shadow. So once she drops, those characters are off the board for your opponent. Lastly, in need combos tier, yeah, Eternal Wanderer Ludwig. That's actually the name of the game for him. He just needs too many combos right now. He used to be holding hands with Requiem Roana. He kind of fell off half a tier, in my opinion, because now if you are a cleaver, you can no longer ban Belian. You have to let Belian out in the open. You have to opt to ban characters like Harsetti, you have to ban either Zeo or Empyrean Ilanav and then play the other in order to cleave. Because Belian is such a threat and she locks away the amount of soul burns you can do, she limits the amount of soul burns you can do. It's just really hard for Ludwig to scale up his damage properly. So he kind of fell off a little bit, still good, but that's his issue. And that's kind of the best 2 tiers of PvP units right now. So after that, I'm only going to go over the units that I think have made an impact, had a change made to them, or got shaken up in the meta game quite a bit. It's still gonna be a lot of units actually, so let's get right into it. And this is kind of our B tier, right? These are just solid units that can get a job done. Top Model Luluca. A lot of really fast players have just been abusing Top Model Luluca to cleave unsuspecting victims, let's just say. It's really hard to play against if you do not know the correct way to counter her, since she can nuke you, she can put up buffs with her extra turn, or if you're threatening the extra turn, she can just drop a soul burn, CR push her team, and suddenly you don't really have a lot of ways to counterplay her. She's kind of hard to play, but you do need one really fast set of gear. Silvyn Sage Vivian, the reason she's popular, super simple. We're in the middle of a debuff meta. If you think about how popular units like ML Luna is, Nock Wool is still extremely popular, and DDR too. Silvyn Sage Vivian, as long as you're not having your focus held hostage, she is completely immune to debuffs, which is an extremely powerful effect. So for that alone, she is holding down her spot in the meta. And you know, if I talk about Silvyn Sage Vivian, I kind of have to talk about Twisted Island Kayron, who is getting a buff. His buff is actually pretty massive, and it's completely designed around shutting down characters like Vivian, where she doesn't run a lot of HP, she has a lot of ways to mitigate damage, and if Kayron gets that full focus bar, the full fighting spirit, he will absolutely just blow up the entire board if your opponent's just not running like double mitigation with hella beefy units. Now on the flip, I do think he's still very easy to counterplay. You can hold back his fighting spirit game with Politis. If you have a really good draft with Tywin, like, I mean, he's AoE counter, so if you get any kind of debuff, Tywin will get big mad and then stun him. Ray can still strip him and put him to sleep, so he's still very vulnerable to the amount of debuffs, but if you are playing a lot of debuffs, you can actually use him to counter characters like the Silvyn Sage Vivian, and maybe even to some degree the Afternoon Soak Flant. We're gonna have to see how that matches up. Little Queen Charlotte, actually really good unit right now. All thanks to her synergy with Benimaru's Tachi, letting her be on a speed build. Once she gets up in speed, you see our push her with characters like Laya and Gala Lilias, and then she'll just be able to drop the sword on your opponent's Abyssal Yufine, Blood Moon Haze, Death Dealer Ray. You get the idea. She's really good at popping dark units, but you do need Benimaru's Tachi to make her work optimally in this meta, so if you don't have that, bit unfortunate, and it's why she's not higher on the tier list. Designer Lilibet got a pretty big buff, and I actually think it's pretty significant due to some units we'll talk about later. You might see them on the list right now. Just know that she's already looking pretty solid because we're in the middle of a metagame where debuffs are super highly valued, and the fact that the more debuffs your opponent has, the stronger she is. I think that makes her extremely strong right now. Specimen Sez, actually also freshly announced today, he'll be receiving his own exclusive equipment, which not only gives him a bit of extra damage on top, which he already does super well with, he will also now have synergy not only with stun, but with sleep. So characters in Epic 7 are played in lines. You know, you'll have your debuff line, you'll have your enrage line, you have a Laya line. Having a character that can have multiple synergies with multiple lines is usually really strong, and I think that bumps up his value because not only does he have synergy with Ambitious Tywin now, more specifically, it gives him synergy with Death Dealer Ray. The other sleep characters in the game, like, I don't even think they matter. Genuinely, it's just the fact that he's better with Death Dealer Ray now. If you think about how he works, right? Death Dealer Ray puts your entire enemy team to sleep, he puts the Diddy on them, and then he S2s, he combat readiness push the rest of your team, so immediately you could snipe off a unit with Extinction. I think that alone just kicks him up a whole tier, and he's a really solid unit right now. This is the one where I don't really know where to put her, so you will find her smack dab in the middle of the entire graph, because I think she has the potential to actually be the unit that pops off the most with the patch, but I also think with designer Lilibet the way she is, with the rest of the game being the way they are, it's really hard to evaluate how good Silverblade Aramintha will be. She used to be like down down here, and then one buff got her up here, and with the rework, I think she lands solidly in middle tier. She's just solid. That could very much change. This is probably the unit I'm looking forward to testing the most, because she will now have self-bridging. She gives herself combat readiness, but that's not just for cleaves. Like, if you think that's just for control, for cleaves, for fast players, no, I actually think the fact that if you take turns, she'll gain combat readiness. What you can do is play her like with a Harsetti comp, or even play her with a Death Dealer Ray comp. Just make her really tanky, make her go on like a counter set, put Abyssal Crown or Bubble Maker on her, and if your enemy thinks they can try to remove her threat, bro, just counter attack, AoE, and if you land any stuns, land any detonates, it's so much icky threat. It's one of those things that's going to immediately tilt somebody. They'll throw their game because of just how annoying it would be to play against. I think she could be played in so many places. Urban Shadow Choux, I think, fell a whole tier. She's one of the units that's not only hurt by just the control meta, the amount of debuffs in the game. Solitaria becoming more popular also means she's going to be harder to play. Her best in slot artifact is already Sweet Miracle, which is a limited artifact, which makes her hard to play. All of the other things compounded just makes her not a prime choice to be played right now. Last Rider Krau. Now he will be also doing the thing Laya does. He lowers his teammates' cooldown. It's going to let you throw out tighter combos. The reason I don't think he will be played like back here again is that Dealer Ray is still too good. I still just think the amount of injuries kind of hold him back. The dedicated damage units in the game do a little bit too much damage for his comfort, but I do think he gets bumped up. I think before his usage was really low, and now he gets bumped up. He's a really good knock wool counter. Knock wool kind of gets taken completely out of the metagame by him coming back. Ruel's job, if you want to think about it from a tactical perspective, is that if your opponent is playing single target nukers, they would always have to kill Ruele first, because Ruele can just bring back whatever they pop, and suddenly they're down cooldowns and they're down tempo, since their units are much squishier, and Ruele will be able to keep her alive longer and still provide more value to her team afterwards. Think about good single target units right now. You got characters Lil Queen Charlotte, Genua, Amiki, even Laya, and now all of those characters will have to target down the Ruele first. God forbid, if you ever get into a draft where you have both Ruele and Empyrean Ilonov, like, your opponent really don't have a way to pick off your Ruele, and your Ruele gets one additional life, so she's just gonna be more annoying. If you play slow, you're afraid of death, Ruel's actually not a bad character. And especially with the buff, she will be, I expect, making a comeback. And in the same vein of anti-cleave, you're always going to have Sage Ball, a really good anti-cleave character. As Sage Ball is good anti-cleave, you have Astromancer Elena kind of doing the same thing in the game, where she's anti-cleave. Removes a lot of your opponent's options when it comes to anti-cleave, and that will just be really annoying since they can't counterattack. A Mediator Kawerik is actually pretty solid, fell off a little bit. The reason why he was so high in the meta before is characters are really good in the meta if they cannot be replaced. The easiest way I can describe to you guys as to why he fell off, like, when do you ever play support Mediator Kawerik over Alaya? Never. Now, his one job is he's one of the few bruisers whom you can pick into Death Dealer Ray. Everybody is playing Bruiser Mediator Kawerik. Now, a lot of people don't know why. It's because he's one of the few bruisers you can pick into Death Dealer Ray and feel like you're not absolutely being destroyed. Judge Kise. Yes. So this is actually one where I don't have a lot of experience, but data suggests, if you actually check data right now, Judge Kise looks really, and I mean, her stats look really good. People really didn't like the rework, but I think it had the opposite effect, right? People were like, you're making her too specific. And I think making characters specific in Epic 7 is good. The thing that determines whether or not characters are good in Epic 7 isn't like how many weaknesses they have. If you think about Arbiter Vildred, for example, he has so many weaknesses. He's not good versus mitigation. He's not good versus revive denial through extinction. He's not good if you deny his focus, but he is very good if you can avoid all of those things because he has such a strong strength. Judge Kise used to be a very generic character where she kind of could play with anything, but she's not the best with anything. But now, if you play a lot of top model Luluca, if you play a lot of Ahmed, there's still Ahmed cleavers on the ladder. Judge Kise is a really strong combo character to be played with them because buff strip into defense break into resetting their cooldowns is just really hard to deal with. Lone Crescent Bellona used to be a lot stronger stronger, fell off because she was the character to deal with anti-crit, a la Navy Captain Landy. But now you have Afternoon Soak Flam, which is not only easier to use, she also swings tempo harder, so she fell off a bit. Strays, he fell off quite a bit because you just have better nukers in the game now, like Low Queen Charlotte. Slow players have Laya, Midnight Gala Lilias, and it's just hard. It's like he just does nothing if you don't ban Empyrean Ilanov. That would be our B tier units. If you don't have any units above B tier, if you just like them, pretty good take already. Very quickly, let's just cover our C and D tier units. C tier units I think are still all right, but they're much more limited in the amount of matchups they can win. And if you like any of these characters, I mean, they're still good, right? We'll go over the ones that have changed very recently. Pretty big one is Lionhart Cermia. They removed her requirement for Fighting Spirit, and she's purely operating out of cooldown now. But the reason she can't be played that well is she's still not immune to debuff. So once you activate her, you can still strip her, debuff her, and if you have enough burst damage, you can just pop her outright. Architect Lyca's another one that fell even further. She's just kind of like a slightly worse version of Strays because she takes setup to use. And Belian's coming out of pre-bans now. You have characters like Abyssal Yufine that completely halves your combat readiness push. It's just so hard to use Architect Lyca, so she will just be knocked down another tier lower. Closer Charles, basically a slightly worse version of Top Model Luluca. Top Model Luluca has options on how she can initiate your fight. Closer Charles doesn't. He can only be forced to AoE, and that's not very good when your opponent can just pick something like Angel of Light and immediately destroy your tempo. Spectre Tenebria, you know, she like kind of went from here to here because she got an exclusive equipment. It's kind of hard to see her so low on a tier list, but her biggest advantage was that she used to be a really good single target character with absolute safety that can close out any match. But now you have characters like Afternoon Soak Flan, you have Genua, you have BBK, Amiki. These characters that not only do more damage, have bigger burst potential, but also they're just safer on the board. They're so much harder to kill. So there's very little reasons to pick up Spectre Tenebria unless you're like somehow missing her after this entire time, or I don't know. There's like almost no reason to pick up any characters in the last couple of tiers. That's going to be our D tier. Fallen Cecilia, Dark Corvus, Faithless Lidica, Commander Pavel, Opsig, and Spirit Eye Celine. This is kind of where the bottom of the barrel is, which it shows you that Smilegate did a pretty okay job bumping up some of these older units. I know a lot of people are asking for a Fallen Cecilia buff next, but like think about how slow the meta game is already, right? Do we really want to bump up the barrier giving unit? I'm kind of okay with these units there. These characters are bad because they're Cindery. These characters are bad because Cleave's kind of hard to play and there's too many floodgates for Fighting Spirit. Opsig is bad because barriers are just so inconsistent in the game right now, and Spirit Eye Celine is bad because she dies to debuffs and we're in the middle of a debuff metagame, so that's why they're where they are. Those last 4 units are the newest 4 ML5s. They're just too new, you can't select them. Just in case you guys are curious, because I do this every time, their approximate power level when you put them out on the chart is roughly like this. Yep, that's it. These characters are hella busted. So if you guys get them, congrats. But if you don't, make sure whatever you guys are doing, you are picking up Ambitious Tywin, Death Dealer Ray from Fallen Lands, and Sea Phantom Politis. Like, if you have these 3 units, honestly, like, I don't see a world where you do not make champion rank if you tried. Anyway, guys, that is the tier list. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, especially with how many units shifted since my, last Moonlight video, but that's my opinion. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments or even go into the Discord. We have people discussing the game there every single day, and it's been pretty cool seeing a lot of new players come in. That being said, that's all I got. If you guys liked the video or you thought it was helpful, you can always help me back by giving the video a like, subscribe. Oh yeah, before I forget, guys, the next tournament is up. It will be on November 2nd and 3rd, and our guest for this month will be Mashu. This is going to be a standard tournament since there's going to be a lot of buff units coming. Me and Divine, the idiots who casted Worlds, we just really want to see how people are playing with the new patch. So the listing is up. Make sure you guys sign up. You have about 10 days. Prize pool right now sitting at $100. If you were there for the last one, we did a draft mode for all the new players. Honestly, I didn't expect it, but we managed to get the prize pool up to a $600. So, and we donated a lot of money for charity. So that was a really good time. I hope to see you guys there for this current one. Yeah, that's all I got, guys. See you.